In today's video, we're diving into exactly why prime lenses have become my absolute go-to for portrait photography and why they could completely transform your work. So first things first, let's discuss what a prime lens actually is. So a prime lens has a fixed focal length. That means that they don't zoom in or out. Quite simply, you get one focal length and that's it, and you have to physically move if you want to reframe your shot. A few of my favorite prime lenses include the Canon EF 85mm f1.4 IS, as well as the Sigma 35mm f1.4 DG Art lens, which I'm actually filming on now. There's another prime lens that I absolutely love that I do not currently have, and I'm going to talk about it at the end of the video because I think it is the first lens that every photographer should purchase. But more on that in a little bit. Speaking of lenses, I'm going to put my glasses on. So put simply, why am I so passionate about primes for portraits? It really comes down to one thing, and that's image quality. Prime lenses have fewer lens elements. Those are the pieces of glass that go inside your lens. There are less of them, which means that the internal construction of a prime lens is simpler compared to zoom lenses. Fewer elements means fewer chances for optical imperfections like distortion, chromatic aberration, and lens flare. This results in a consistently razor-sharp image. Details are beautiful, colors are accurate, faces look natural, and skin tones can be rendered beautifully, which help me capture authentic portraits every single time. So why prime lenses? Crisp portraits. So portrait photographers love to talk about bokeh. That's the dreamy, soft background blur. And prime lenses more typically feature very wide apertures like f1.2, f1.4, f1.8. This one is f1.4. So is the one that I'm shooting on now. In fact, I am shooting right now at f1.4. These larger apertures, wider apertures, larger openings, right? Larger openings, they allow a more shallow depth of field, which beautifully isolates your subjects from the background, gives you that gorgeous, dreamy, creamy bokeh look that draws the viewer's eye to your subject. Another standout benefit for prime lenses, also related to the larger aperture, is low light performance. So thanks to that wide aperture, prime lenses can gather a lot more light. That allows me to shoot confidently in dimly lit environments, in shade, indoors, outdoors, nighttime, morning time, and I'm not compromising quality of the image by adding a lot of noise, although I do love me some film grain, by increasing my ISO, or the sensitivity of my sensor, which can make things less sharp. But using a prime lens, okay, now this is gonna sound a little counterintuitive, but using a prime lens restricts you to that single focal length, which actually boosts your creativity. With a prime lens, you physically have to move to frame the shot, which means for me, I'm exploring new angles, new perspectives, and ideas that I might have missed if I had just simply sat in one place and just cranked that zoom in and out. So being constrained pushes my creativity and often results in more uniquely compelling portraits. It also means that I sometimes fall down. So what are my go-to prime lenses for portraits? So I've talked about this lens before. This is my Canon EF 85mm f1.4 IS. Quick side note on this lens, as some of you may notice, especially if you are a Canon photographer, this is an EF lens, which means that it is the older Canon mount. I have not upgraded my 85 to the RF system yet. Why haven't you upgraded your 85 yet, Joe? Couple of reasons. There are 3 85mm lenses currently available for the Canon RF system. There is the RF 85 f2 macro. That is a wonderful lens, comes in at a beautiful price. f2, but put quite simply, I would be giving up a lot going to f2, and that lens just doesn't have the image quality of a lens like this. It is not their professional grade lens series. They do have 2 85s in their professional lens series, both f1.2, which means that they would actually be able to collect more light than this one. And at 1.2, they would give me even smoother background bokeh, or out of focus elements. And one of them, because I mentioned there are 2, one of them is a DS model, which means that it actually has defocus smoothing available. So you can actually, on the lens, you can manipulate the lens to change how much or in what way those out of focus elements are smoothed or out of focus effectively. But again, there are some trade-offs. Number one, neither of those lenses have image stabilization. This lens does. So while I would be getting an additional half a stop of light, I would be losing 3 or 4 or 5 stops of stabilization that this lens offers me. And secondly, those lenses are between $2,800 and $3,100. And because this is a newer version of the EF mount, I actually get all of the benefits of the RF mount system. I can shoot at high speed, the autofocus is amazing, and combined with the in-body image stabilization in my camera, this lens does amazing even at slow shutter speeds, keeping camera shake to a minimum. So this is my number one choice for portrait sessions. This is pretty much it. So if you're coming to a portrait session with me, you're probably gonna see this lens on my camera. So why 85? 85 is widely considered ideal for portraits because it provides a pleasing compression effect. Now, while there are a lot of technical details around compression, the simple aspect is that it minimizes distortion of facial features and it creates flattering portraits. Now, some photographers prefer shorter focal lengths like 50 or even 35 for environmental portraits. But for me, 85 perfectly balances the detail, gives me flattering proportions, beautiful background compression, and just the right amount of distance from my subject. Some folks will tell you that 100 or 120 or 135 are also amazing for portrait photography. But since I switch back and forth between solo portraits and families, those are just a little too close for me. Now, if I am shooting environmental portraits or storytelling images, where I want to make sure that I have my subject, but also maybe a little bit more context about the environment, then I'm reaching for my Sigma 35 f1.4 DG Art lens. Now, I can't really show that one to you because it's actually attached to the camera right now. It's my favorite video lens for filming informative videos like this. So the Sigma 35mm Art is a beautiful lens. It's constructed exceptionally well. It's small, it's lightweight, and there's something about the character of that lens and the way that it makes images look that I love and that I have yet to be able to duplicate with some of Canon's first-party offerings on the RF lens mount. Now I can hear the photographers in the comments saying, but Joe, why are you still shooting EF? Switch over, come to the dark side. So I shoot with the older mount of the EF lens in the 35 as well, because number one, I love that lens. The Sigma 35 gives just an amazing kind of character to the images that I shoot with it. I'm always blown away by the images that I see out of that lens, like legitimately surprised when I get them up and look at them on the big screen. But not unlike the 85, up until very recently, we didn't have a first-party alternative to things like the Sigma with a native RF mount. Now, Canon has just recently released a 35mm prime f1.4 in their Professional L series, and it's what's called a VCM lens, which means that it has their newest focusing motor. Now, that lens also doesn't have image stabilization, although at 35mm, image stabilization is less necessary because you're not going to get as much camera shake. My Sigma doesn't have image stabilization. But to be quite honest, I just don't shoot with it enough to justify switching at this time, because it is an expensive upgrade, and that would be a cost that I would need to pass on to my clients. Now, when talking about the difference between prime and zoom, it's important to note that focal length itself isn't the defining factor when discussing prime versus zoom lenses, right? A prime lens isn't necessarily better than a zoom lens because it has a specific focal length. I have 2 zoom lenses right over there that can do 85 pretty well. And I've got another one over there that'll do 35 really well. But once you've found a focal length that suits your style and your vision, gives you that image quality, restricts you in a way that boosts your creativity, the need for the zoom functionality diminishes significantly. All you have to do is physically move around and you'll frame the perfect shot. So I've pointed out that I do have zoom lenses. So let's talk specifically about when and why to choose prime lenses. So when do I specifically choose a prime lens over a zoom? In controlled environments, when I'm in a studio. If I am chasing ultimate image quality and consistency, primes win every time. Zoom lenses have versatility, but primes provide the artistic vision, the precision, and the image quality that I'm looking for, that I demand in professional portraiture. And if I know what my environment is going to be in advance, if I have a general idea of if I'm doing outside natural lighting portraiture, I might not always go with the 85, but I'm gonna go with a prime. But if I'm going into a place where I have no idea what's gonna happen, I need maximum versatility, then that's where I might be reaching for a zoom lens. So let's talk about some of the practical considerations and some of my tips for using prime lenses. So if you're thinking about giving prime lenses a try, here are some specific practical tips. Practice moving around your subject to find the best framing. And I mean this in two ways when I say practice. When you're with your client, practice being around them, right? Moving and finding and discovering, but also practice being comfortable moving around like that. You literally might want to set up some obstacles in your living room and kind of move around them, and also feel comfortable to look like a crazy person spider monkeying all over these obstacles with a client in the middle. Make sure that you know how to communicate with them, make sure they understand what you're doing. Be mindful of your aperture. If you're shooting too wide, you could potentially miss critical focus. So depending on how many people you have in your shot, depending on where you are relative to your subject, and depending on how much of the environmental background you do actually want to include in the shot, make sure you are keeping an eye on your aperture. But again, experiment with this at home. Play with distances from your subject to decide how your lens and your camera and your comfort is with depth of field. So there you have it. Prime lenses give you unmatched sharpness, stunning out of focus elements, exceptional low light capability, and they creatively challenge you to become a better portrait photographer. Prime lenses didn't just change my photography, they literally elevated the art that I was creating. So if you've got a favorite lens that you've been shooting with, go ahead and put it down below. But before I end the video, I want to give you just one little bit, my last tip. If you're just getting into photography and you're looking for lens advice, this is the #1 tip that I can give you. People just getting into photography have a tendency to look at specs and stats and numbers and think that the more numbers, the better. You might also be concerned about investing in lenses like primes that will effectively limit your capability in some cases. And from a budget standpoint, they're traditionally more expensive. So you're literally looking at spending your hard-earned money on something that might actually not be as versatile. And when you're starting out as a photographer, that can be really, really hard. But I'm gonna give you this piece of advice. This is my #1 tip for prime lenses. What's the first lens that you should buy whenever you get into photography? And I think this is pretty much the same for the 3 top camera manufacturers. I'm talking about Canon, Sony, and Nikon. I think this is probably true on Fuji as well. Go get a 50mm. Normally it's a 1.8. It's sometimes described as the thrifty 50. There's a couple of different versions of it. If you're on the Canon side and you can find the 1.4 EF version, especially at a good price, they call this the nifty 50 because it's normally a little bit more expensive than the thrifty 50. It's an f1.4 aperture, so more light, more out of focus elements, all those things that we talked about. That is the direction that you want to go. Now, I love 85, but 50 is a phenomenal focal length. And if you're shooting on a crop sensor camera, like a 90D, or some of the new ones like the R10, the R50, the R7, that 50mm lens is effectively going to be an 85. And you'll be cropping in to the center of that lens where it is the sharpest. And it is already an exceptionally sharp lens. But whether you're on crop or you're on full frame, go get yourself a 50mm lens. I will tell you, you'll be able to resell that lens for very close to what you bought it for, and you should be able to buy it for a relatively low price. If you can find it used, do it. It's worth investing in an adapter if you're shooting Canon and you want to get an EF lens for your RF mount. Moving from a kit lens like an 18 to 55 with a variable aperture and all these other things that's made of plastic and has bad coatings on the glass to something like a 50mm f1.8 will revolutionize the images that you're able to get and prepare you for kind of the next step in quality portraiture. I cannot tell you how many professional jobs I did in my first few years as a photographer where I basically shot on nothing but my 50mm 1.8. And I would bet that there's a bunch of folks who are going to comment down below who did the exact same thing. Don't buy the 18 to 300 f4 to f6.3. Don't do that to yourself. If you're looking to get into photography, especially portrait photography, and you want to make money, that's my #1 tip. This is the #1 tip. All right, so that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Again, if you found this video informative, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button. If you want more stuff like this, comment down below. And if you want to keep seeing my videos, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. We just passed 18K here on the channel, hoping to hit 20 through the summer. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.